Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shift. Today, we're speaking with Lisa Boehm about a subject that I've wanted to talk about for a while because, as Lisa and I were talking offline, grief is something that we all deal with in myriad of ways, and yet is something that is almost taboo to talk about until, like Lisa, you get hit over the head by a 2 by 10 plank of tragedy, grief, sadness, all of those things. It's just, and I think part of it, and Lisa, you can agree or disagree, is that, again, we don't talk about it. We kind of pretend that it can't happen to us because we don't want it to happen to us. And I know I came close to losing our son and only child when he was 17. He got cancer, life-threatening cancer. And it was like, wow. So I often say I came to the edge of what you've experienced. And just can't imagine what it's like to go over that edge. And you've had to. So thank you so much for your courage for today. As a bit of an introduction, I'm going to read from your beautiful brochure. Lisa is a certified grief educator and the author of Journey to Healing, A Mother's Guide to Navigating Child Loss. As the host of the Angel Moms podcast, Lisa supports bereaved parents while sharing her own journey after losing her daughter, Katie, in 2015, 9 years ago. Lisa's mission is to create a safe space for open discussions about grief, helping those who are grieving feel understood and empowered to take the next step. So this is part of Lisa's mission, to talk openly and vulnerably about her journey. And the thing that just popped out at me as I read Lisa's information was this sentence. Lisa talks about learning to carry grief in one hand and joy in the other. And that's a beautiful place to start. Or we can start with your story, Lisa. I turn it over to you and know that you're going to be a wonderful guide for us today in talking about grief and joy. The floor is yours.
I want to say thank you, Sheila, for hosting a discussion on this difficult topic. As you said, this is not something that we talk about when we get together with girlfriends for wine or coffee. This is not something that comes up at the holiday dinner table. And probably this is something that our mothers or fathers did not sit us down and have a talk about when we were growing up. Grief is this thing, as you say, that we love to sweep under the carpet. We're masters at that. But I think this discussion does start at the beginning of my journey, and I promise to keep it short, but I think it's really important for people to know what my journey looked like, because as we get into the grief and the joy and all of this, it definitely ties back to my basic story. I too had a 17-year-old, and Katie, actually, if anybody's watching us on YouTube, can just see over my shoulder here. And, at that time in my life, our biggest concern, first world problems here, was organizing everyone's schedule so that we could take a family holiday, right? Katie was dancing, my son was playing basketball, my husband's a high-level executive at the cancer clinic. I work at the cancer clinic as a radiation therapist. We're busy, busy, busy. And at the time, Katie was 17, my son was 15. Katie was the kid I never worried about. She was on top of schoolwork. She'd come home. She'd say, Mom, I got 95 in calculus. I'd say, great. I didn't know you had a test. Super. She had just applied into our local university. She was given a full scholarship into nursing. had great friends, good decision maker, solid head on her shoulder, great, great, great boyfriend. And on a regular Tuesday night in December of 2015, she was sitting in this very office and had forgotten something. She came out of the office and kind of yelled down the hall to my husband and said, "Dad, I have to submit this essay by midnight. Do you mind looking it over? I have to run out and do a quick errand. I'll be right back." And I kid you not, when I say she breezed past me, pulled on her winter boots, her parka, and was out the door quicker than I was able to say, "I love you, see you soon, goodbye, drive safe." And my kids always had to be home at 10 o'clock on a school night. So at 9:45, I was texting her and getting ready for bed. And I just said, "Hey, hope you're on your way. See you soon." Get into bed. My husband gets into bed beside me. Just open up my book. And we hear ding dong. And my husband and I looked at each other just like, why is Katie ringing the doorbell? So my husband gets up and, trudges down the hallway. But when the door opened, I could hear this very authoritative male voice. And normally I wouldn't run to the door in my pajamas, but something told me to go to the door. And here in my front entry stood a police officer and a lady in black, who at that time I assumed was another officer. And the officer wasted no time. He was very compassionate, very kind, but he sat us down and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Boehm, I regret to inform you that your daughter Katie has been killed in a car accident." Just like that. And I always say that that was the moment in time when my life, our family's life, became divided into two very distinct timelines, before and after. Just about everything my husband and I talk about now, especially since a lot of time has passed, just past 9 years, was that before Katie died or was that after? That kind of thing. And that began my journey on this path that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But to get to your question about this crazy notion, probably sounds crazy, of carrying grief in one hand and joy in the other, that was an evolution. I wouldn't say that was just something that I decided upon and it just happened, although I do believe that we do have to decide when we want to make change, when we want to shift. But my daughter was full of life. She was goofy. She was a diva. She was sassy. She was saucy. She was just full of life.
And she's beautiful.
Thank you. I think so. But I remember questioning myself, as we all do, because grief is this thing, as we said, nobody talks about. So all of a sudden, grief shows up. And I remember thinking, for a long time, I thought, I think I might be doing this wrong, right? And the fact of the matter is, there's no right or wrong way. I mean, there's a gajillion books out there written about grief. Mine is one of them, but no professional, no experienced person can sit down and write a how-to manual. Every one of us have unique personalities, right? Prior to experiencing loss, we all dealt with things in our own way, right? Because we're different. All of our life experiences leading up to the loss were different. Some people have had trauma. Some people have experienced multiple losses. Like, we are all different. Therefore, we will all react and need different things after we experience a loss. So having said all of that, I was confused because I had, the other weird thing about grief that I think is really important to talk about, I always thought grief was extreme sadness. But something that I've learned is that we never, ever whether it's grief or not, we never experience one emotion at one time. Just like we have, and forgive me, I don't remember the exact number, tens of thousands of thoughts per day. We have an emotion attached to every one of those emotions. So even in a 5-minute span, I don't know, my math isn't that good, but let's say we have 1,000 thoughts in 5 minutes. You know, I need to go to the grocery store later. Oh, geez, I wonder how my mom's doing. She had knee surgery lately. You know, my son is home with a bad cold, whatever, you know, this is our brain. And like I say, we have an emotion attached to every one of those thoughts. Therefore, even when we're grieving or even when we're happy because, you know, this wonderful thing happened, all these little thoughts and all these little emotions are happening alongside of it. That is normal. We don't question that in day-to-day life until we are in grief. And then we think, geez, I just had a happy thought. God, what's wrong with me? Or, you know, I'm really angry about what that person said. You're still grieving, but you're also angry in that moment, right? And I just started to be really curious about this. But, you know, when you're in acute grief, honestly, formulating a sentence can be a challenge. I remember one time making dinner, and I love to cook. I experiment with recipes all the time. You know, cooking is very natural, very normal for me. And that meal, I made chicken. Just chicken. Because that's all my little brain could manage at that time. But like, as I say, grief is an evolution. And I think being open to different ideas is kind of what led me to this idea of carrying grief in one hand and joy in the other. And this is the moment when it was kind of like the big aha Oprah Winfrey moment. The three of us, my son, my husband, and myself, traveled a lot after Katie died. And when I say travel, sometimes it was a weekend getaway. It wasn't always a big extravagant thing, but here I had a 15-year-old son who was kind of off the rails already. I had a husband who was not a big communicator, and myself. So 3 human beings living in one house that were dealing with their grief vastly different. And we felt that, as strange as it sounds, we needed to learn how to be a family of 3 after being a family of 4 for so long. I can't tell you how hard that empty chair is at the table. So anyway, we would leave for the weekend. We would leave for a week, whatever. But we found ourselves in British Columbia, Canada, in a place called Nanaimo. Beautiful, beautiful place. And we love to hike. So we went on this hike and kind of knew where we were going, but kind of didn't. And went on this long hike, and kind of the hike ended up spitting us out onto this gorgeous beach. So very end of July, like the perfect day. The perfect day. And the weird thing was that there was no one on this beach, which still strikes me as very odd. But so we walked kind of straight from the forest where we were right to the water's edge. And as I say, the day was perfect. The sky was blue. I think there was one little cloud floating by. And I wrote Katie's name in the sand. And my husband and son started walking down the beach. So I kind of mindlessly was walking behind them, but they were way far ahead. And I just remember thinking, this is an amazing place. You know, I've got the forest to the left. The sun is shining. It was the perfect temperature. It felt like a warm blanket on my shoulders. I was kicking through the edge of the water. The sand was soft. And I remember tipping my head up to the sun and just in that moment feeling happy and joy. And then thinking, oh my God, what is wrong with you, Lisa? Your child died. Like, how awful are you? And this was maybe, I can't remember exactly, like 6 to 9 months, somewhere in there after we lost Katie. And, you know, first of all, spent a few minutes beating myself up for just experiencing this minute of joy. But then I kind of thought, well, wait a minute. Did I forget about Katie? No. Did I feel like I was not grieving? No. So that's kind of when I had this big aha moment when I thought, well, that means that I can have grief, but I can experience joy as well. And that was one of a few very, very pivotal moments on my grief journey. Now, from that moment on, did I, you know, excel at grief, or did the grieving process get any lighter, easier? No. But just having this awareness and giving myself permission that I could feel multiple things at the same time and be okay with that. And I would say, even if we fast forward to today, so I'm 9 years out now, I still have rotten, stinky, awful days, but I also have good days, happy days. And I can go to a barbecue and I can enjoy myself. And I can go and do pretty much anything now and be happy. The grief is always with me. I know a lot of grieving moms I've talked to have said, well, what will people think? What will people think if I'm happy or having fun or smiling? Well, I don't care, is kind of my answer. I feel like I am honoring my daughter's legacy by smiling and laughing and living my best life, if you want to call it that way. Just
The best life you can.
exactly. I feel like I am my daughter's legacy, and I never ever want her death to be in vain. I never want people to look at me and go, "Oh, that's Katie's mom. So sad." And it is. Katie's story still has a sad ending, but I would rather people look at me and go, "Man, that lady's been through a lot, but geez, she makes sure that Katie is remembered all the time, and she's helping other people," or whatever it is. So that's a very long answer to your question.
Well, it's a beautiful answer, and it contains a wealth of insight and wisdom. And one thing that I'm curious about is the fact that you say the grief is always with you.
Mhm.
So how do you describe grief? What is it? If it can it coexists with everything else, but
Mhm.
what is it in and of itself?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, grief is a mishmash of different feelings, and I think on any given day, grief might be different for you. I also think that in the beginning, when you experience such a traumatic loss, grief is like a vice around your heart. It hurts to breathe. You cannot think of anything else but that moment, that time, that excruciating pain. But actually, one of the best explanations I've heard, and I can never say it quite as eloquently, but President Joe Biden, after he has experienced, I think, a number of losses, was speaking to an interviewer about the way he would describe it. And I believe he said it was like a wave. And that wave, sometimes it's like a tsunami, and it pulls you under, and you have to doggy paddle and keep just to keep your nose above the water. But then that wave kind of goes out to sea again. And then, it comes in. And in the beginning, those waves are all tsunamis, and there's very little reprieve between those tsunamis. But as time goes on, those tsunamis will still come, but they won't come as often. And for the most part, I would say those waves in time get smaller and less violent. They might lap at your knees. They might kind of pull you a little bit, but they won't pull you under. So they become less frequent, less intense. And I think, again, when we go through hard things, whatever it is, I mean, we know plenty of people who've gone through divorce or lost their jobs or lost a spouse or lost their homes. I mean, there's all these terrible traumatic things. I think I hate to use this word because people get angry with me, but we do get stronger. You know, like when I have my tsunami hit me, for example, it's like, oh, here's the tsunami again. But I can remind myself, I've been through this tsunami so many times. I know I'll get through this one too. And I think the longer that we can deal with things in a healthy manner, the more we kind of have this mindset of, here I am again. I did it before. I know I can do it again. And I also think that we do get stronger. You know, in my book, Journey to Healing, I talk about this suitcase. In fact, it was a short story that just kind of came out of me one day, but how this man came to my door one night and he just gave me this horrible, beat up, yucky, heavy suitcase and left. And I didn't know what to do with this thing. You know, I had to drag it with me everywhere I went. Anyway, it was a metaphor for grief and death. And I know people hate to be told you're so strong, but that's the fact, right? Because we do have to lug this horrible, heavy thing around. It's, you know, whether you think of it as a suitcase, whether you think of it as a boulder you're carrying around, however you picture it in your head, every minute, every day, every week that we carry this dang thing, we kind of learn how to carry it, you know? So how do you do it? Oh, one step at a time, one day at a time, one breath at a time.
One thought at a time.
Yeah. Like in the beginning or on those rotten, stinky tsunami days. Yeah, it's one thought at a time, 5 minutes at a time, for sure.
So I'm curious about getting back to this grief and joy thing. I think that grief, and again, you can correct me, but it seems to me that grief carries certain messages in our thought system, and joy carries certain thoughts in our belief system. So if grief speaks to, when grief calls you and pulls you into the ocean again, what thoughts accompany that?
Gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. I would say it varies because acute grief, that awful, awful, awful beginning grief, it's a very dark place. I mean, I think it's normal. I've learned it's normal now. I didn't realize it was normal then, but I had suicidal thoughts. Was I going to act on them? No. But all I wanted was to hold my daughter again. All I wanted was to be with her again. So, you know, this thought went through my head. Does that thought ever go through my head anymore? No. So I would say it's very normal for grief to be a very dark place. And, you know, one thing I think that is doing us all a disservice is this idea, this theory that was written 55 years ago, the 5 stages of grief. Now, on one hand, I think it's fantastic that 55 years ago, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had the notion to write a book about grief, right? To start talking about it. But the unfortunate part about that theory, right? Like, I'm a healthcare professional. I learned that in school, right? I thought that was the end all be all. You know, that first you go through denial, then you go through anger, you know, and it's these neat little boxes and you kind of graduate from one stage to the next. And then magically you end up at acceptance. Well, the truth behind that theory, and when you understand the perspective and the reason why it was written, it makes a whole lot more sense. Because when that theory is applied to someone like me, it's like, I never denied it. I'm a very factual black and white girl. If somebody tells me my daughter's passed away, unfortunately, that's fact. I was never really angry was angry at grief and death, but I wasn't angry. I never bargained. Anyway, the reason that it was created was to explain what a patient would feel when given a terminal diagnosis in the hospital. So if you just put your thinking cap on for a minute and you think of someone perhaps who went in for tests, is in the hospital, and the doctor says, gosh, Mr. Brown, I'm so sorry. You've got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You know, your time here is very limited. I would suggest you get your affairs in order, blah, blah, blah. That makes more sense that he's going to be in denial. He's going to, have this bargaining kind of conversation with God. He's going to feel angry. He's going to go through depression. And at some point in time, he's probably going to, arrive at this place of, God, I guess this is my deal, and some level of acceptance. But unfortunately, this theory is just smeared like peanut butter on related. So then that adds more to your feelings of, I think I'm doing this wrong. Gosh, and it's confusing for those who are grieving, because I think we've been given this message of this is what it looks like for so long, that when we start experiencing it for ourselves, we think, I don't think I'm doing this right. But grief definitely is something that morphs for most people. And it changes from these deep, dark thoughts, to, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for everybody, but I'm in a place now where Katie, it's not the grief so much, but Katie is always right here. She is with me. And I always say it's my love for her that connects us. It's not the grief. And grief is kind of something that's over here all the time. I use the word healing a lot, frankly, because I can't find a better word, but will we ever be healed? Heck no. It's like a massive wound that gets a big scab over top of it. And there's certain things that happen in life that rip that scab right off. And then it's got to build up again. But I'm at the point in my life where I live a pretty normal life. Like I say, I can have fun. We go on vacation. We do things. I probably talk about Katie, I don't know, numerous times a day. Christmas is a whole different ballgame in our house now. It's not as fun and joyous as it once was. I have to back off a lot and give myself a lot more downtime. But these are all little things that I've learned in my journey. And I don't think that we can tell other grieving people, well, you're going to have to take more time at Christmas, or, because we're all different, right?
So Lisa's right there in front of you. And do you talk to Lisa?
Do I talk to Katie?
Yeah, Katie, not Lisa. Sorry.
I do. In the beginning, part of my self-induced grief therapy, I did all the things, but one of the things that I did, we had Katie cremated and we brought her ashes home, and for a long, long, long time, they sat in the front room by our great big front window. This was a room that we spent a lot of time in. Katie loved that room. And my husband would go to work, my son would go to school, and I would literally pull up a chair with my coffee and I would talk to Katie. And I would say the things that I never got to say, because I never got to say goodbye. I would tell her what was going on, even though I felt her presence and I feel like she knew what was happening, with our family and in the house. But there's still, even, fast forward to today, there's still a lot of things that I do in my life. And I just, what do you think I should do, Katie? Or what do you think about this? Or, and it's not like she's given me answers or anything, but she is still a part of my life. And I know that sounds crazy for anybody who hasn't lost someone close, that's near and dear, but I really think one of the things that's helped me is creating a new relationship with her. You know, I'm a science girl. I work in health science. Anybody who, disputes this idea of some kind of, maybe not life, but some kind of existence after life, is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. That's a scientific fact, right? So when you think of yourself, I always say that this thing here, my body, is just a rental. I get this for whatever amount of time I'm here. What makes Lisa Lisa is something that's inside of me. I can't even tell you what, but it's inside of me. So I imagine that when my body expires one day, this energy, this Lisa energy, won't have a shell anymore, but it cannot be created or destroyed. So anyway, I mean, that's a little bit of a side road there, but I do believe.
Well, I think it's an important one, though. I think it's an important one. And it certainly aligns with what I believe about the body and energy and love. Love is the connector.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious about whether you knew all this before Katie's death.
I don't know. We could go down a big bunny hole there. I had a certain number of spiritual beliefs. I mean, my grandmother came to me the night that she passed away. Katie came to me the night that she passed away.
Tell us more about that. Tell us more about that, if you don't mind.
Oh, it's a story that I love to tell. So the night Katie died, the police came to her house at about 10 o'clock. Her boyfriend, I work with boyfriend's dad, a doctor. And so they came over for a short period of time. My mom and dad came over for a short period of time. It was getting late. And I just said, everybody go home. We'll talk again in the morning. So what do you do? My husband and I got ready for bed, and we just literally laid on the bed, eyes wide open. And I think, we held each other for a bit and cried, of course. And we were laying on the bed, and just the way our room is set up, there's a great big empty wall directly across from the foot of the bed. And I said to my husband, what's with the lights on the wall? And of course, we were both in shock and numb and all this. And he's even more sciencey and geeky than me. And he said, I'm pretty sure that must be from the street light. Well, realistically, A, this had never happened in the 20 years we've lived in that house. B, the street light was out the front of the house. Our bedroom is in the far back corner of the house. But, in that moment, I was like, oh, okay. And then I could tell by his breathing that he had fallen asleep. And this whole thing, I'm going to tell you, just happened in a matter of 3 minutes tops. So he fell asleep, and I could tell by his breathing. And it was like the minute he fell asleep, I sensed these two, I don't even know what to call them, but there was a presence in my doorway to my bedroom. I've got a white door. It was open. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see a shadow. I didn't see people. Like, it was just, I sensed that something was there. And because my grandmother had come to me in the exact same way when she passed away, I guess maybe I was a bit more attuned to this. So at this point in time, I'm like, oh boy. And I sensed there was two. How I knew that, I don't know. But I said, oh, I know what it was. So then the whole bedroom becomes enveloped in Katie's perfume. Like, she wore this certain perfume from Sephora. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh, Lisa, you are losing it, girl. So I'm pinching myself under the sheets, and I'm poking myself, and I'm like, okay. And I kind of came to this conclusion. I'm cognizant, I'm awake, I'm aware. And then I said out loud, Katie, is that you? And I could literally feel this separation of these two spirits, if we want to call them that, and one started moving towards the bed. And in that moment, I knew that Katie had come to say, Mom, I'm okay. I'm with Grandma. I'm okay. I made it to the other side. And as soon as my little brain kind of connected all the dots, and it was like, holy mackerel, this is really happening. Gone. Lights, gone. Perfume, gone. The sensation that something was there in the room with me, gone. But I know without a doubt what I saw, felt, saw, like all the senses. The next day, I didn't say a word to my husband because I thought for sure he'd call the hospital. But my mom and dad came back over, and I said to my mom and dad, so I had this thing happen last night. And again, kind of tentative, not sure if I should tell them. And my dad said, no way. The same thing happened to me last night when we got home. So we kind of figured out it was roughly the same time. My mom and dad live in a condo. It faces an urban lake. There's no lights back there. It was 1 a.m, like it was dark. But he said he went out on the deck, patio, whatever you want to call it, to get some air. And the lights that I described to him on our wall, that's the way he described lights, but he said it was around the bottom perimeter of the patio deck. He said it was just like this ebbing and flowing. It wasn't disco lights. It wasn't flashing. Like it was just this ebb and flow of light. He didn't have the perfume or anything, but it was the same kind of deal. So again, that was a huge pivotal moment in my grief journey because I knew without a doubt, Katie was not gone.
Her body was gone.
Her physical essence was gone, but she was not gone. So that really helped me. And I think that's really what instigated me in talking to her more, doing different things, meditating more, opening myself up to spiritual growth. And anybody who knows anything about, spiritual growth, the spirit world has a better time connecting with us when our vibration is up here. So that's the vibration of love, gratitude, kindness, all of these kinds of things are high vibe emotions and states of being. Grief, sadness, anger, blame, shame, guilt, all this is way down here. So when I kind of put all this together and I thought, when I'm kind of vibing up here, I feel Katie more. I get signs more. I find more feathers. I will have more dreams. It was like, well, dang, I got to find a way to get, up here more. So,
so it's like joy lives up here and grief lives down here. And it sounds to me that you're saying that Katie lives up here now. She's in the place of joy. And she wants that for you too, I would say. She wants that for you. Do you think she wants you down in the tsunami of grief?
100% no, with a capital N. There were times even on those rotten, stinky, terrible tsunami days, I'd be laying on the floor and I could almost picture her in my mind's eye. And I'm sure that's what it was. I'd be like, oh, come on, Mom. Like she would kick my butt, besides helping people, my other mission is I want her so stinking proud of her mom. I want her up there elbowing the other angel saying, see that lady? See that lady in the purple sweater? That's my mom. And I'm not probably going to make her proud if I'm miserable and I'm horrible to other people and I'm snapping at people and I'm, just living in this place of misery.
I think that's so important because I think, and you've kind of touched on this a bit, there's a certain amount of guilt.
Oh, yes.
If we're not down here. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to be grieving. That's what people expect. And it's also kind of disrespectful to Katie if I'm not there. And what you're saying is totally opposite of that, is that we don't honor the Katies in our lives when we stay in the tsunami of grief. And I also hear you saying it's not always easy.
Oh God, no.
No,
Nope.
no, it's not always easy. But yet there's that pull of Katie calling you, Mom, Mom, I'm here. I'm here. I'm up here. I'm not down here. Yeah, well, Miss Lisa, thank you for your wisdom in sharing your journey. And I think when we're in joy, we are in healing. We are healed. Even though it doesn't feel like it, there's a part of us that's always there. Do you agree with that? There's a part of us that is always in joy, and we disconnect from it consciously or subconsciously. What do you think?
I agree. I think a big part of life, frankly, like even if we step away from grief for a moment, is believing that things are possible and choosing to make change.
Mm.
I mean, I cannot tell you how many pieces of hate mail or messages on Instagram or whatever that have, been really awful to me because how dare I say that, that there can be joy again and all that kind of thing. But I think we have to be open to it. We have to choose it.
Yes.
In the beginning, that can really feel awful. It can feel
Yes.
hard. It can feel impossible. And that's where I really invite people just to open up your thoughts to maybe, is it possible?
Yes.
And just not slamming the door on joy when it shows up, because it will feel very weird the first time it shows up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's heartbreaking to me that, you receive hate mail, you who are a messenger of love, if I may say so. And yes, again, it's this sense that I must stay down here.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I dishonor my loved ones somehow. So I'm so grateful for your courage, because it takes courage to speak out when you know that your message is not always received openly or with gratitude. So thank you. Thank you again. Yeah, is there anything you'd like to add before we stop recording?
No, I think we've covered it all. And I think just to come back to the whole purpose of your podcast and your channel here is just to be open to the shifts that life brings us, and that we can make choices to shift in a way that serves us better, if that makes sense.
It certainly makes sense to me. I'm going to stop recording now, and I do remind everybody that there will be information about Lisa. I'm sure she'd love to be on any podcasts, speaking, buy her book, and take the journey with her to a place of healing and love. Love.